minute. We're getting started here. Sorry. Okay, now you can see. Let me share. A whole lot of problems there. I'll first go to your LMS to see exactly what is your status in terms of submissions. I try to see what is going on, and then after that, we will find it out. That how many of you have actually submitted? OSG202. Let me scroll down where exactly it is. Input, output. Labs must be down there. Submission. 304 of 334 submitted. 167 ungraded. Okay. I don't think you guys have submitted fully, but still, let me check. Year group is AI1604. AI1604. One not submitted. Okay. So one of you guys didn't submit. Vinfuk, are you here? Vinfuk, are you there? Okay, it seems that you didn't submit it. So naturally, you will get a 0. No choice. Right? We can't help you there. And then we have a few other things to check. In the meantime, I give you a heads up about what is going on, what is coming up, what do we need to do. What we need to do right here is you will have to do a presentation. You will have to do a presentation, and for the presentation mode, I will give you some tips on how to get started. First of all, it will be an online presentation. So if it is an online presentation, then naturally you will have to do, for the online presentation, you will have to do it individually. And I will get it started on week 9. So basically it will take a lot of time. Week 9 and week 10 will be for your presentation. Okay. Most of the information that you need regarding the vital information about your presentation, how to prepare for your presentation, is already given to you on LMS. So just go and check it. Okay. There are a couple of other important instructions are like I will be taking a quiz. So presentation is just one part. The other part is the quiz. That means I will ask you questions. I will ask you questions about anywhere, from anywhere, about any topic that we have studied right here. And that is what we are going to do. So the point is, in case of presentation, you have to prepare very well for the question and answer sessions. And these questions and answer sessions will contribute 50%. But as I mentioned before, the question and answer session will be firmly based on the chapters that we study here as part of our exam syllabus. Okay. So that is what it's all about. It's not about the presentation topic. The presentation topic will be different, but we are not going to ask questions from that presentation topic. Okay. So that is exactly what we mean. So we need to stay prepared for that. There are quite a few things that got started together, but none of them we are going to study today. We are going to study something different. And file directory. This is what we are going to get started with. A minute. File directory. How many people are here? 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you have any question about your presentation, feel free to ask me and get ready. Yes, you can ask me the question. Min Kuang, you raised a hand. You want to ask me a question? If you want to ask me a question, you can type in there if you want. In the next 3 weeks, we'll cover the 3 other chapters. In the meantime, another one is going on. Which one is that? This one, 17th October, progress test. Let me see what is the status. I think I can't check it in that way. Now going down to presentation, as you can see on your screen, yours will be online. Okay? We will take the online presentation. We'll take the online presentation, and we need to be careful about that. If you have any question for this part, for the presentation part, feel free to ask me. Maximum number of slides, 5 slides per student. Some students, they don't stick to it. If you don't stick to it, then again, you will be penalized. Okay? Make sure you understand its implication. Maximum times 10 minutes per student, whichever expires first. I will add the penalization thing once more, so you guys strictly stick to it. So we move on to a new chapter. If all is set, then we move on to a new chapter. Get started. And as I said, that one is going to be file systems. This one. Okay. In other words, the things that we are going to study now, it all is about how operating system controls and implements, if I may use that word, your hard disk. In the previous chapter, we were more concerned about what operating system does in terms of RAM management. And right here, we're going to talk about what operating system does to implement files and folders, thereby mapping the entire disk. Now, since it's also a form of memory, We call it permanent memory, but memory all by in any ways. So we have more or less many of these old techniques that will be applying on this. I don't know where I can't see it, right? There we are. So let's get started and see exactly where we stand. Let me pick up. So what we have here is a hard disk. And from the user's experience, when you open our hard disk, this is what we see: a bunch of files and folders. So the first question naturally that comes to mind is, what is this file? What is this file and what is this folder? That's the very first thing that comes to my mind. If you ask that question, then naturally that again has two answers. Just like process and the other things that we discussed before, we can answer this question either from the user perspective or from the system perspective. If you want to answer this question from the user perspective, the user experience, so what do you perceive to be a file? You think a file is basically a collection of data, you might say, that you want to store in one single place, isn't it? The internet is a little bit wobbly today. So again, from the user's point of view, a file is basically a collection of data or collection of information. As I ask the students what it is, that is, most of the time, that's the answer I get. But is it really so? If you look at a file from the user's point of view, then it seems the files are tangible. Tangible means you open your hard disk and you can see, that is my file. This is my file. This is my file. Okay. So we can view the file. This is your file 1, and you can see the file, at least the icon of the file. Yeah, that tells you that that's the file that I saved yesterday. I will open it. Now there is a whole bunch of illusion going on, because what you are looking at and you perceive to be your file, Word file, right? And you say, this is the file again I saved yesterday, and I can see the name, say abc dot docx. So I saved this file, and this is my file. And you have the impression, because as you double click on here, the entire file opens up and it's all full of the same old data that you saved here last time. So you are under the impression, you or me, when we are using, we are under the impression that this is our file. And all those pieces of information and data have been stored right in here. This is a kind of doorway. All I need to do is to double click, and then I access all the data, and all the data spans out. So when I ask my students that what exactly do you perceive the file is supposed to be, what is file? Most often the answer I get is the file is a collection of data or collection of information, an organized collection of information, or data, all data stored in one place. But none of these are actually true from a system point of view. Try to understand it from a system point. This is true from the user point. From the system point of view, first of all, if this is your hard disk, where is your file? I mean, this file that you saved. So imagine a situation, it may sound a little bit ridiculous because we don't do it that way for obvious reasons. But, well, there's no harm assuming that you give it a try. What I mean is you pull your hard disk out. I mean the hard disk, the real hardware. You pull it out from your laptop and you crack it open. You break it. So all you see is a stack of disks. Now, can you point your finger to any part of this disk stack and say, hey, this is the file that I was looking for. My file that I saved yesterday is just there. That's it. You point your finger in one part and you say, yes, that is the file that I saved. You understand that this is an absolutely ridiculous idea, isn't it? We don't get it that way. That you can't say, this is my file. But that is exactly what you were looking at. Try to understand the difference. There's a user view and the system. So basically, user view gives you a layman, and if you are a layman in this computer science and you don't know much about computer science, as a normal user, you believe that that is your file that you saved. When you open your hard disk drive, and you can see each individual file saved separately. So you believe that all your data is concentrated right there. If it is true, then why, when you crack your hard disk open, you can't point your finger to one particular spot on the disk stack and say, hey, that is the file. That is where my file is written. All the data for that particular file is stacked up right there in this part, in this spot on the disk. That's an absurd idea. So there must be something going on in between, right? And that is why we are here. So in reality, no one except operating system, except file systems, a component of operating system. No one knows where exactly inside your hard disk drive, in bits and pieces, that means in smaller byte blocks, the entire file or the data that the file contains has been dumped. It can be a little bit here, little bit here, little bit here, little bit here. or here, 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 here. We don't know. Anywhere on the hard disk. Anywhere. In a randomized way. Wherever there was enough little space, they were dumped in a random way. But now, if it is dumped in a random way, we do need someone to make two ends meet. That means both the system's requirement, satisfying the system's understanding of the file, and reinterpreting it to the user as a user-friendly version. And that is the job of OS, or a component inside OS that is called file system. Yeah? And that is what we are going to study. Like wherever we go to study memory-related management issues, I mention once more that whenever there's memory-related management issues, there must be that word called mapping. That is exactly what they are doing. Okay? They're trying to map. So we have these important issues that we are looking at, and we understand that why we are in this chapter. So let's move in and see what we have in store. File directory. Why do we need it? There's also a word that we are looking at that's called the directory. Okay. Now, all right, I'll pick up this word and I ask you, because in the last one I talked about file, right? But I forgot to talk about directory. So we still stay on this page and directory. Now I would like to ask you a question, that how many of you have directories, or have you ever seen a directory? What is a directory? What, in your perception, is a directory? Again, so we talked about file, and we know what file system does for file. And now we are here talking about directories. And again, we split it down into two parts. One is user view. One is system view. What do you think about the user view? What do you think about the user? What is a directory? I would like to ask you, if possible, you can send me the answers. You can send me the answers. So we have the directory, and so on the one part we have the directory, and what is your view of the directory? That is the question. What do you think a directory is? What could really that be? Anyone has ever seen a directory? If you are aware of this word, if you have ever seen the directory, just let me know the message. It is the address to save some file. You say it's the address to save some file. It's a kind of halfway into the correct answer. You said it is an address to save the file. It's an address to save the file. Okay, I accept it. But now my second question comes. Do you have a directory? So can you exactly give me an example of what you mean? The address. You can write it down on the LMS. And I see what you mean. Send me an example. Address where some files are located. But okay, thank you for your answer. Now, I appreciate that answer. Yes. And then the next question. The next question that I would like to ask you, that what exactly you mean my files are located? What exactly you mean my files are located? In the directory. Do you mean everything that belongs to that file that you downloaded, all are inside that directory, inside that address? So what is your interpretation of that? What do you think? Well, as some of you gave the answers, and I say that I accept it with a little bit of reservation, but you're actually saying the right thing. It can be presented in a different way. For the users, so one answer we got is the address. Where files are saved. I have problem with this. Not very clear. Okay. Number two, so the question, any other view? Anyone else? We will have a general discussion today. We don't have to rush through it. These chapters are not so complicated like the previous one. We'll just rush through it quickly. I will try to find out later how things happen. So tell me that if this is the one that you're looking at, the address where files are saved. Anyone else will come up with any other idea of what a directory could be? In many computers, in most of the computer systems today, we refer to directory as the folder. Now, there is a contradiction because for some students, they straight away refer to it as folder, and some students, just like you did, refer to it as an address. So if I put them together, which one would you go for? Because they're pretty contradictory, right? From the user point of view. You must be wondering how a folder can be an address, or how an address can be a folder. Isn't it? So what do you think? Which one will you go for? You still go for both of them? Because you know it's a folder, and at the same time, it's also so how will you think about that? What will be your perception? Should you go with a folder, or is it a folder or an address? Which one would you go for? Both. So could you explain how you can define directory as both? Because when we see a folder, that means it's a container, isn't it? That's why we give it a name, folder. So folder is basically a container that we can open the folder and we see all our files and folders, subfolders stored right in there. Right? So how will you explain a container? How will you refer to a container? This is a container as an address. How do you refer to a container as an address? So by address, you mean you are referring to the container. Is it so? That you are referring to that container by using that address. In other words, if I use the address as you said, that E drive apt, then slash my file So inside your hard disk, I go to the E drive and then find a folder, apt, and inside the folder, there is my file. So both of them can be referred to as directory, right? So in other words, that if I follow these direct address, I get the whole of the file in that folder. Or, as I said, the folder, as we perceive, is a container. Or is it so? Is it right? Is it a container? What's your take on that? Is it a container? The point is no. Okay? And you'll be surprised to know, again, how can we claim that it's a container or it's an address? It's an address of what? Is it address where my file is stored? That's not right. Your file is stored anywhere, everywhere, inside your hard disk. No one knows, as you already mentioned, no one knows where the bits and pieces are. So basically, if you take the first one, that you say that it is an address to what? Address to a link which is basically a list of attributes. Try to understand this whole abstraction concept. An address to the link to where? Well, basically, when we use the word folder, we get the impression that it is a container. There's a container. The container that you're looking at is very much like this. That is what we call container. And that contains so the one that we have in the container part, that is what we mean by folder. We see the files getting stored right here. But if you open the file, if you open a folder, do you think, say for example, this is your folder, and when you go there, you see your files. Now that you know how the actual files are stored, are dumped In reality, that means bits and pieces of blocks of data are dumped randomly inside your hard disk, the physical hard disk. Do you still believe that this little icon right here contains all the data? No. So by using the directory as an address, you are referring to this point. Am I right? But by referring to this point, you are not accessing the data and you are not accessing the whole of the data. So what is this inside the folder? So what is the folder? What is this that you are referring? That's something that we call an entity called file. So the point here, since we are in the directory part, a folder and a directory is just another file. Get used to it. What you said, what you meant by saying that it is an address, basically you were, as I said, that you were referring to the path, relative or absolute. A path. That's not the directory. That's called the directory path. That can be relative. To relative means relative to another folder, another subfolder, another file. Or it can be absolute, always starting from the root directory of that partition. That's why, in the first place, you started from E colon, which is what we call the root directory. But we know that it's all about folder. So this directory, this is what you meant. But my question was, what is a directory? What not exactly a directory path? So the address that you mentioned is a path that will lead you to the directory, which basically in most of the computer systems, we use the word folder. But for some reason and obvious reasons, we are not going to use the word folder right here in this chapter. We are not going to use the word folder because folder is a deceptive word intentionally used to create this false illusion. Okay? To make things more user-friendly. Of course, we are deceived to believe that the file, the entire file is inside my folder. I can see the file. That is my file. But in reality, that's not the case. When you look at it from the real systems point of view, these understandings are very important. That's why I'm spending time. It sets the ground and your expectations of what we are going to study later. If you have time, you don't have to worry about running out of time. But try to understand these concepts because this is quite revealing. Because these are the things that we see. In fact, memory for RAM, we don't have the time, we don't have the opportunity to see how RAM works, right? But in the case of hard disk, much of these things we are familiar with because we see them all the time. That's a new perception that you will be having. So, by following the directory path, you come to the directory. And what does directory store? That is a directory, obviously, directory is a storage. Wait a moment. So the directory is a storage. There is no question about that. So again, in terms of file directory, you get a container or you get a storage. Agree? Because when you go inside the folder, that's what you see. You see a container, you see a storage. Now, if it is a storage, then what is it storing? That is the next question, the very next question I'd like to ask. What do you store right in there? If it's a storage, what do you store? What do you store in that storage? If you say it's another file, the storage that we are talking about here is basically a list file. It is a file. A directory is nothing but a file. I might say a flat file. It's a system file. System file, a flat file. Okay? Of type list. So I might better say of type list. So that is exactly. So back to the list file that we are talking about. So what do we have inside the list? We basically have a list of items. For example, the item number 1, maybe file number 1, file number 2, file number 3, file number 4, and so on. And all these files have been stored inside a list file. And this list file is what we call the directory. And so what are the things that we store for each of these items, each of these files that we have so-called stored or organized inside our hard disk? To start with, we have some vital information. That is called, all these that we are storing here are what we called the metadata. Okay, of F1, or some information, vital information, or some attributes. For example, name, date of creation, type, size, author, and a few hidden things. Those are not displayed to us. One of them is what we call an inode link. Or basically not link, it's just inode number. This inode number, remember as I said, that these things are not displayed to us because this is not for us. We don't have to understand what inode for. But we understand that this is the trick, because once you pick up the inode number, you can access all the bits and pieces that I mentioned earlier inside your hard disk. So you can now access all bits and pieces inside your hard disk. Okay. So that is what we do in folder. So who does it? It's not for us. Who is supposed to access it? Of course, your file systems. Your file systems will be doing it, right? So that is exactly what we do when we talk about the file systems. So the file systems and the directory and the files, they're kind of like complementing each other. They are complementing each other, and they're working together to make this wonderful illusion of files and folders. So that's one of the reasons we are not going to use, in this lecture, we are not going to use the word folder. We will continue to use the word directory. Now that was my purpose right here, this particular class, in this particular session. You have now a clear idea of exactly what is happening inside the systems, because that is something that you have to keep in mind for the rest of the chapter. If you are still under the illusion, just like as a user, thinking that it's a container, thinking that it's a storage, then you will be struggling to understand the other concepts. So you need to be careful about that. So that is what you will have to do. So we have the directory on the one hand, and on the other hand, the files stored in the directory. As I said, it's a list file of 5 pages. A simple thing, simple operation, simple comparison and analogy might be like this, that you create 2 lists, 2 shopping lists. One is a morning shopping list, and you put some items there. This is for the morning, and this is for the evening. It's a list where each row contains an item that helps you to organize your plans for the shopping. So you say the first one is tomato. You say 5 kgs of tomato. If you have a particular brand, this brand of tomato, where will you buy it? And how much do you expect to pay? What is your budget? So this full information doesn't mean the actual 5 kg of tomatoes are here. Try to understand. Those 5 kg of tomatoes are still in the market. But referring with a reference to this particular piece of information that you have stored right here, you will eventually end up in the market with those 5 kgs of tomatoes. And then suddenly you change, and similarly you store some other items right here. But then you change your mind. You say, no, I've changed my plan. I'm not going to buy the tomatoes from the morning market. I would rather buy them in the evening market. So you cut it from here and paste it into your evening shopping list. Try to understand. Does it mean that you actually moved your 5 kgs of tomatoes from this list to that list? Definitely not. Your 5 kgs worth of tomatoes are still in the market with that seller from where you want to buy. You changed the plan. So what we are looking at in terms of files and directories is still the same. This is a very important concept. That's why, since we have time, I spend this session talking about it, because many of us, I should say all of us, we have a wrong impression. And that is true, because that is what the Microsoft and the others, they want us to believe, because we don't have to be computer science genius or system specialist to know exactly how to use a file and folder. So they have created certain icons, they have given some beautiful fancy names that naturally creates an image in our mind that it's a container that contains the files and the folders. But essentially, that's not true. If any of you know, well, probably you had to do it, I don't know, but you were asked to use Fedora, Shell, and Midnight Commander or something. But if you just go back and use the black and white command prompt, the shell, without any user interface, you just search for the directories. What do you see? you see a list of items. You see a list of items. It's not a container. It's, yes, it is a container in a sense. It contains an user organized or user maintained list of files and folders. And for each list, each item in the list, it stores some metadata. And those are the data that show up. Those are the data that show up when you go to open your folder. Look at it, isn't it? And you believe that 13.9 KB worth of data is sitting right there? No. This is what we called, later you will understand, this is where the actual money is, making things user-friendly. That's a whole different bunch, and perhaps one of the most exciting bunch of information technology, software engineering, okay, designing issues. If I put it right here, that means 15 KB worth of data is right in there? No, I don't know where this 15 KB worth of data, actual data in small byte blocks, have been dumped in a random way inside my hard disk. But as I look at it, I get that perception, that feeling. How do I get it? Because there was a list of metadata, and all these metadata, much of it, has been picked up, and with a beautiful visual effect, they are giving me the details. It's a PNG file, dimensions, size, the author, date of creation. That's it. Also, a couple of hidden ones that is definitely not for you. That's only for the file systems, including an inode pointer. So when I double click on it, file system will jump in and they follow that inode number to go and get those bits and pieces and put them together and present it to a process. Because remember, all these files, that user files, I'm not talking about folder because folder is a system file. The other files that a folder contains, only a process can read them and can write into them. Right? So we need to be careful about that. Okay. All right. We'll leave you here. You think a little bit about it. We didn't get started. No worries. But my first purpose was to break the myths that most of us we carry in our minds. Because if you don't come out of that illusion, it will be difficult for you to believe that what they're doing. But once you are out of that illusion, once you start thinking in terms of a system, you take the system view, then everything will fall in place. Pretty easy. You will find a logical connection to all of these. Okay. So that is one of the most important things. All right. You take a quick attendance. It has already expired. Okay, Xuan Huang, Chi Kang,
Yes.
Vin Phuc, Duc Wong,
Yes.
Luong Ha,
Yes.
Hu Huang,
Yes.
Dan Hum,
Yes.
Nop Phat,
Yes.
Linh Min,
Yes.
Quoc Huy,
Yes.
Hoi An,
Yes.
Kim Thak, Kim Thak, Nhật Min,
Yes.
Hiền Phúc,
Yes.
Quang Huy, Quang Huy, Minh Quang,
Yes.
Duy Bao,
Yes.
Quay Min, Liêm Trúc,
Yes.
Quoc Hum, Quoc Hum, Quang Huy, yes, Xuan Huang, Vin Phuc, Okay, so we'll see you again on Wednesday and we will jump in deep inside, see what we can do.